The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I'm the Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, The Future of AP, 7 Important Trends to be Ready for in 2022, presented by AvidXchange and SWK Technologies. A little housekeeping before we get started. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section in your GoToWebinar, and we will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. We are also recording this presentation, and it will be distributed tomorrow to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were unable to attend. And finally, we would appreciate your participation in our polling question at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend this webinar, and we're here to help you get the most out of your software solutions, helping you find an easier way to run your business by providing you with tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. So whether you're here researching a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions you have. And lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more webinars like this. With that said, I'll now turn it over to AvidXchange. I'm so excited to have Rhonda and Jack with us today, and I'll let them take it away from here.
Thank you. So today we're going to talk about the future of AP, 7 important trends to be ready for in 2022. So our agenda is we'll talk about the current state of AP, 7 important trends to be ready for in 2022, AP automation with AvidXchange, and then we'll leave time for Q&A at the end. So current historical pain points for B2B payment management. I know these are things that I've seen time and again in my long career in AP management. And on the forefront, I think we continue to see, unfortunately, a rise in fraud and the overall fraud risk. I know people are always concerned about a lack of visibility into their data. Inaccurate and error-prone processes continue to plague companies, as well as typically with AP, a manual process is very cumbersome and very, very time-consuming. So these are things that we're going to kind of break down today. So businesses are always facing new challenges, and I think we can definitely say that more than ever now in the last couple of years. The disjointed workforces that kind of COVID brought along, 94% of organizations are allowing for more flexibility in where and when employees work. So I know that here at AvidXchange, we have a kind of hybrid blend where we're able to work from home, but also go into the office, at least one day a week. So it gives that flexibility that we're all looking for and allowing for us to continue to be safe. Also, cybersecurity threats with employees and equipment leaving the office and moving to remote settings more and more often. Networks and vital business information are becoming more vulnerable. Per Deloitte, 72% of businesses say the cyber threat against their organization has increased over the last 2 years. 34% say it's grown even more during the pandemic, and I don't think that's anything that surprises us as we're all dealing with that. And respondents also to the Deloitte survey are most unsure in their ability to resist cyber threats when using new technologies, which is an undeniable trend, especially in the AP and AR space, as 94% of CFOs surveyed by payments.com have either digitized their AP and AR processes already or plan to within the next year. So with new tech, of course, comes uncertainty. However, if embraced, tech and digitization can definitely cure many headaches that come in today's business climate. So let's talk about 7 important trends. The Institute of Finance and Management, IOFM, teamed up with AvidXchange to project how the evolution we've already experienced may inform the future and offer thoughts on what AP and P2P trends could take hold in 2022 and beyond. So the first one is what we just talked about, that staff in transition. For many employees, working from home has been a tremendous benefit. On the other hand, some can't wait to get back to the office for the convenience, lack of interruptions, and the amenities that are available there. Accenture's Future of Work study revealed that 83% of those surveyed believed a hybrid work model would be ideal. Hybrid defined as work from home 25 to 75% of the time. 27% of those who expressed a preference for returning to the office cited easier access to technology as their main driver. The war on talent is also a very real concern for CFOs. As you know, many workers are switching employers to boost their wages. CFOs have responded to workers' newfound leverage on compensation and to pay increases by their rival companies. Hourly private sector wages rose 4.8% in November of 2021 from 12 months before, and that's according to the Labor Department. Remote work raises, of course, the questions of the best way to manage and train people while keeping them engaged and ensuring process consistency. I know, again, as someone that's been in AP and AP management for many, many years, AP is certainly not a department that you would traditionally think of as being remote. And I think that's why businesses had so many issues with the pandemic, is because they didn't have access to their invoices or to be able to cut checks and make payments. So it really did kind of propel automation into the forefront as more and more companies were kind of scrambling to figure out what to do. So a survey of over 1,400 board members and C-suite executives worldwide showed talent retention and succession challenges presented a greater risk to businesses in 2022 than overall market demand and inflation. Not far behind is the need for current employees to develop new tech skills to remain impactful. This concern takes the top spot for those that are thinking 10 years ahead. They're already thinking about 2031. And if we look at the graph here, pandemic-related government policies and regulation impact business performance. That's the top 5 risks on minds today. But what are they thinking about in 2031? They're thinking about adoption of digital technology and how it requires new skills or significant efforts to upskill or reskill existing employees. So as you can see here, a lot of the thoughts that are on the minds of these executives are all around the pandemic and, again, the kind of conditions that it caused. So adoption of digital technologies requires new skills or significant efforts again. And so it's, again, something that they have to think about is, do we substitute products or services that arise and that could affect our business model? So how do we grapple with this talent crisis? How do we manage, an ever-growing business model without having to continue to add heads? So the second trend that we're seeing is end-to-end paperless solutions. So something most AP organizations discovered in the past year is that paper processing was no longer a viable option. So going into the office to retrieve invoices from the mail or print out those checks was really not an option. And they looked toward an answer, and what they found was automation. 77% is expected to climb in 2022 as more organizations realize the benefits. So the IOFM in their benchmarking showed that 77% of surveyed AP teams have adopted some form of automation, and this is certainly what we've been seeing the last few years. Departments that considered themselves automated because they were maybe scanning in their paper invoices or routing invoices for approval via email soon realized that this was really not a true paperless solution. And that's certainly something that we hear a lot at AvidXchange when we're talking to prospects. But they're realizing that maybe just having that digital file cabinet is not enough, and they actually need much more. And it's also unlikely that once automated, AP organizations will ever go back to that manual process. It really makes no sense. And you can see here the trend as that automation and moving towards an automated environment has risen over the last several years. So number 3 is greater strategic focus. The move to paperless processing, which obviously will allow AP teams to become more strategic. And this is something, again, that we talk about all the time. Wouldn't you rather have your employees focusing on more strategic tasks, maybe more reconciliations, and other things along that line, as opposed to manual data entry or folding checks and stuffing envelopes? So they can start focusing on things like process improvements, creating workflow efficiencies. Also, a big one to me is always around our suppliers and our vendors. So one thing that I always recommend as an AP best practice is to clean up those master vendor files. That's going to save you so many errors and possible fines and penalties with the IRS as you go along. And it really allows you and gives you time to investigate suppliers to ensure compliance. So it really, again, is taking those manual data entry type tasks and letting your AP team be more strategic and be able to focus, really on more important things. Number 4 is better data, better reporting. Business intelligence gained through data can shed light on these important trends and more impactful financial stories. So reasons to value that storytelling is presenting information to business leaders in story form really makes for a compelling case for process improvements. And that even sometimes AP can be turned into a profit center. And yes, you heard that right. So data can uncover missed documents, billing errors. One of the most significant benefits of AP automation is that data generated by the automatic solution or the automated solution. These metrics can tell a resonating story that's less biased, more reliable, and consistent than manually compiled reports that are also dependent upon staff who may be collecting these things manually. Definitely, I cannot begin to stress how much quicker you'll have information at your fingertips over a manual process. No longer will be using Excel spreadsheets to manage so much of, especially your month-end or year-end tasks. And per Accenture, traditional finance and accounting skills are still important, but along with general management skills are among the lowest priorities. The top skills being actively introduced into finance are data exploration and analysis, 41%, followed by scenario planning and horizon scanning, 38%, innovation, and then storytelling at 34%. So definitely something that we've seen changing over the last couple of years. So number 5 is more robust cybersecurity. I never thought, 25, 30 years ago, when AP was 100% manual, when having to manage check fraud almost on a regular basis for a large corporation that I worked for, because there were so many bad actors out there stealing the mail, getting a hold of checks, washing the ink, changing the payee and the dollar amount, we were constantly having to work with our banks. So it's hard to believe that in 2022 we continue to talk about this. But fraud is actually expected to continue to rise. And the best protected organizations will employ a very strong cybersecurity and risk assessment partner to help thwart it or prevent it. And so some of the major fraud risks for AP are ransomware attacks. We've actually seen these become an ongoing security threat. Digital transformation has obviously accelerated, largely due to the rise in the remote workforce. So unfortunately, as that has happened, companies went, obviously increasingly digital because they needed to, but unfortunately that led to cyber criminals and giving them new opportunities in the way to commit fraud. According to the University of Cambridge, 54% of cyber insurance claims were caused by malware or ransomware in 2020. Also, check fraud. Checks may seem convenient and cost effective, but as I just said, the risk is greater and greater, and really it's greater than the reward. So according to the Association for Financial Professionals, they did a survey in 2021. Checks continue to be the top vehicle for payment fraud. No surprise there. The survey points out that 66% of businesses that were victims of payments fraud were targeted via checks. I can't stress that enough. At the very least, you should be using some of the tools that your banks offer, as in Positive Pay. But really being able to have a partner that can combat this for you on a daily basis is critical to being always one step ahead of these bad actors. Also, oops, sorry, Jack, you could go back one, thank you. So the reduction or near elimination of paper payments naturally will reduce the risk of information theft and fraud, because obviously those bad actors, those fraudsters love paper. So again, when you're thinking about moving into an automated world, you can definitely count on seeing a reduction in fraud as those kind of round-the-clock surveillance creeps up. So how does AP automation enhance AP security? So again, as businesses were regrouping or from post-COVID confusion, as again, fraud incidences will continue to be a threat more than ever. Strong cybersecurity is necessary, and this involves things like checking for code vulnerability, endpoint security, data and asset management, constant monitoring and careful management of identity and credentials. AvidXchange's fraud detection and prevention program is based on COSO's fraud risk management framework, using a carefully crafted fraud response plan combined with preventative controls. It's so important to be preventative and not just reactive. And that includes things like training staff to be aware of red flags, performing fraud risk assessments, and setting guidance for what steps to take in the event of a fraud incident. AvidXchange's AP automation solutions enhance AP security in 3 distinct ways, and that's security monitoring, 24/7, 365, identity access management, making sure the right individuals have the right access to resources at the right times and for the right reasons, and also data security. Help protect many data types and information. No more paper checks floating around the office or worrying about storing sensitive information in a filing cabinet that someone could certainly get a hold of. Number 6 is compliance challenges, and this is definitely something that has been on the uptick in the last 5 to 10 years. More and more compliance issues and making sure that you are doing everything that you need to do to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success. So compliance has always been a concern for finance, but it has grown. So let's keep a few points in mind. Remember that 2022 reporting of 2021 payments, both for 1099s and 1042s, the electronic filing threshold has decreased from 250 forms of a single type to 100 forms of all types combined. And that will decrease further for next year's reporting. So again, you're seeing that move away from manual processing more to a digitized solution. So you need to be ready. Extension requests for 2022 forms must be faxed and not mailed in. Enhanced enforcement of the Corporate Transparency Act and the Anti-Money Laundering Act. Be sure you are doing everything that you can do in terms of your vendor screening and making sure that vendors are compliant. And of course, tech will play a major role in ensuring compliance. I couldn't agree more with that statement. It goes back to what I said earlier about some of the most important things that you can do are really at the beginning of your AP process, really at the time of vendor setup, is making sure that your vendors are all compliant and that you're doing all the screening necessary to make sure that you won't run into problems later down the road. And number 7, hyperautomation. So hyperautomation is the rapid moved technology needed to keep pace with great change. And so what are the experts saying? Well, Jess, the Shear, executive editor of the IOFM, says that we're continually seeing a move toward AP automation. And there's every reason to believe that this trend is not confined only to accounts payable. Chris Tinsley, who is the Chief Technology Officer here at AvidXchange, says that industries are changing at a breakneck pace, now more than ever before. And it's imperative that software uses the advanced technology and offers state-of-the-art processes to help the business operate faster and more efficiently, while supporting that hybrid remote workforce operating in an accelerated environment. So again, when you're thinking about your next steps, obviously we're all moving toward automation. So if you're not there yet, now's the time to really look into it. And through presentations like this, you're able to learn more and more about how to set yourself up again for the best success going further or going in the future. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jack, and he's going to talk about AP automation with AvidXchange.
All right, thank you, Rhonda, for setting the stage there and sharing some interesting feedback from a lot of different sources that I think really target why people are automating and where the benefits of automation can come in. So if you thought of any of those particular reasons as a good reason to think about automating, we're going to talk a little bit more here about specifically how AvidXchange is going to help you get there. So really, if you think about your manual processes today, and even if you have a semi-automated process, as Rhonda spoke to earlier on, what a lot of people have found out, especially in the last year or two of having a hybrid work environment, is that the more automation, the better, and the quicker information can become accessible to your team. So when you're thinking about having better analytics and better access to information, one way to do that is providing better visibility to your AP activity before it hits the accounting system, which could have to go through multiple steps, as you can see here in the kind of before diagram up here, where you have people that are physically opening mail or saving invoices. Some or circumstances, they're printing those from email and circulating them around the organization to get approval and coding completed. And then accounting still has to manually enter that information to the accounting system. And then there comes the ability to automate the payment side of the process as well, which is really where you're going to eliminate a lot of those manual steps that occur from the time that you have to create a payment batch, and you might have to separate out several different batches for different types of payments. You still got your paper checks that need to be stuffed in the mail, and you've got to respond to all of the inquiries and provide additional information to those suppliers. So in the diagram in the bottom corner here, after automation, really your team's going to be tasked with coding, approving, and authorizing for payment, and eliminating any of the repetitive touch points and manual entry. So how we're going to do that is really help you with Avid's Strong Room platform, which is going to help for any of the folks in the audience today that are manually processing invoices with their Sage environment, really to eliminate the handling of invoices at the front end of the process. So if you think about having an accounting team member who's opening mail and scanning invoices, we'll help eliminate that entire process and streamline how invoices come into the organization. So we can do that through receiving invoices to an email inbox. You can scan and upload invoices, and if you do have a good percentage of your invoices coming in via the mail still, we could set up a PO box where you can have invoices simply sent to us, and we'll open the mail and capture those invoices for you. So we then put the invoices through a data extraction process where we ensure that all the header level information is captured accurately from those invoices, and based on the business rules that you decide are going to kick off the workflow, we'll define workflow processes during our onboarding process to notify the appropriate people of those invoices that need approval. And that could be different, whether those invoices reference a purchase order or whether they're a strict payable invoice that needs to go through maybe 1 or 2 layers of approval. So the good news is that regardless of what your control points and approval steps are today, those can be replicated through an electronic automated workflow. And the first thing that we'll be able to do for you is to facilitate the PO match. And this becomes a very tedious process when you have purchase orders that live inside of your accounting system. You might have a receiving step that occurs in the accounting system. And then when the invoice comes in, the AP team today in a manual process is having to look at every single purchase order and every single invoice to determine where there are matches and where there are exceptions. So what we'll be able to do is to analyze that invoice against a set of business rules that you can define, matching that to the purchase order and identifying those exceptions in an automated process. So when the PO matches directly to the invoice, it can move directly to the accounting team's final review step before anything posts to the accounting system. And you could eliminate having multiple layers of touch points and having to manually evaluate that particular invoice against the PO. When there is an exception that's determined, that can automatically route that invoice to the appropriate stakeholder who can take action, whether that's someone on the purchasing team. If it's maybe giving you a flag because the items haven't been received, maybe it goes to the warehouse. You can define what those exception steps are going to require from an approval standpoint and allow the invoices that do have exceptions to flow to the appropriate stakeholders, make those decisions, and keep the process moving forward, where you can then really eliminate the manual touch points to any of the inbound invoices that aren't tied to a PO by having things like the vendor or the ship to address or other criteria that we can pull from the invoice to direct that into the appropriate workflow. And you'll build as many layers in that workflow and conditions that may be required to complete the approval to meet your internal controls. So this is really where, if you've got an email-based approval process today, you can implement more stringent controls and make sure that the appropriate stakeholders signing off on those invoices, the appropriate set of eyes gets on to how those invoices are coded, and that you maintain any of those internal approval thresholds so that you get the executive approval where needed, and the accounting team is assured that all of the appropriate approvals have been obtained. They don't have to go back and double check the email thread or something of that nature to confirm that. This is also going to help you with compliance when it comes audit time, because capturing that date and timestamp of the entire audit trail is going to give you confidence that the invoices have gone through the proper controls, and you'll be able to prove that by providing access to your auditors to audit trail reports and give them greater visibility to all of those internal steps in the approval process. From there, we utilize an API integration to sync information to and from the accounting system. So at the end of the workflow, once your invoices have been approved, we're going to create a posted batch in the accounting system, eliminating the need to have another touch point inside of the AP module in your accounting system in order to post those invoices. So if you think about the number of times that the AP team may need to touch an invoice today, you're really narrowing that down to one touch point where they can give a review, they can make sure that any approvals that haven't been obtained get obtained and reroute things where they need to be, and have that the confidence that all of the invoice activity has been approved. Rather than them keying information in, they can spend more time doing analytics, having reporting available at their fingertips and being able to be proactive about processing accounts payable. And that leads directly into your payment process. So once those invoices have synced to the accounting system, and you would typically go through your weekly or biweekly check run, you can now process payments more closely to their due date. You can also manage the timing of payments by scheduling payments, and this will also provide you with the ability to really eliminate all the manual touch points that occur once you've decided which payments are ready to go out to your suppliers. So you can have an electronic payment authorization workflow that's going to enable your check signers to operate digitally. So if they've ever had to, stay in the office or during the pandemic had, checks delivered to their home to physically sign, you can eliminate that. They can approve those payments from anywhere on any device. And then where the AvidPay network really comes into play, and we're going to spend a little bit more time digging into this in a few slides from now, but where AvidPay's network effect is really going to come into play is helping you convert those payments that today would be made via check to electronic payments. The AvidXchange payment services team is going to help facilitate payments day in and day out to those suppliers that we already have onboarded in the network, meaning that other customers have made a payment to that supplier, and we have a profile that tells us how that supplier received payment. So we'll know what the mechanics are, what the method of payment is, know where to deliver the remittance advice so that that supplier has the details of the payments so they can do the application on their side and not have to contact your accounting team. What we're also going to do is take this a step further, and this is really where we find that over the years a lot of accounting teams have struggled when they've tried to move to electronic payment processing is the time it takes to go out and collect that information from their suppliers. Also having to store information in some type of secure way that typically isn't available to be stored in your vendor master in the accounting system. Like, what are the mechanics of delivering the payment to the supplier, not just what their banking account information is. So we'll actually reach out proactively to suppliers and onboard them. So when we identify suppliers that are typically receiving checks or that haven't engaged in a conversation with us to sign up to receive electronic payment, we're going to reach out proactively to those suppliers through what we call a just-in-time enrollment process. And that's something that we do to onboard the suppliers on your behalf. You don't have to spend any effort chasing suppliers down for banking information. We're going to manage that as part of the natural process. And if we get a supplier on the phone, then we have the conversation and determine what method of payment they can take and what the mechanics of delivering that payment are, as well as any business rules, which are often part of the process where a supplier may be willing to take an electronic payment, but they may want to dictate certain rules, and we'll maintain those rules to ensure that they can receive the most volume of payments electronically. And so the cleared payment information after this process is complete, it's going to flow back into the AvidXchange interface, and then we're syncing that into the accounting system. So think of us as being a front end to the AP process that you go through in the accounting system today. And along the way, we're also going to be syncing data on a daily basis from the accounting system. So your vendor master, your chart of accounts will be synced, purchase order data will be synced, checkbook balance information can be synced as well, so that you have up-to-date information and you never have to go into two systems in order to approve or process AP. So what this is really going to look like for you is each user that is responsible for approving invoices or managing the AP process from the approval standpoint is going to have a unique login. They'll have an email notification that will typically go out and notify them when they have action to take. So you can customize how frequently those notifications will prompt your approvers to log in and take action. And that approver is going to have visibility to their own activity. So our My Invoices screen here is going to dictate visibility, whether that's across multiple companies or entities, across multiple approval steps. You can define what that visibility is going to look like. You can also highlight things and prioritize invoices and make sure that they get the most attention when there's something urgent or something that needs action taken immediately. You'll also be able to dictate your role-based visibility to all the folks that may not be part of the accounting team, where they may only see one particular approval step for a certain category of invoices. So you're able to roll this out very flexibly to as many individuals in the accounting department and in the rest of the organization that need to have visibility to AP activity. So from the time we capture the invoice, the header level information will get populated over on the left side of the screen. You'll always have visibility to your inbound invoices, And then coding rules can be defined to either pre-populate coding, so we can pull coding from your vendor master. We can utilize line item templates as well to predefine coding, or to save coding on the fly for repetitive use. So there's a lot of flexibility to really eliminate having to code everything individually, where there's consistency, especially for those monthly recurring bills where they may be coded and split out on a regular basis by the same percentage. You can build those rules and logic into the system. You could also build conditions that could trigger an additional workflow step. So if you were to tag a specific department, there might be an additional layer for that department manager to approve. So you'll have the flexibility to define what those steps and rules are as those invoices come in and need to get routed through their internal approvals. Without having to think about who this needs to go to next, the workflow can drive that automatically and notify that next approver. So from a visibility standpoint, you can not only have visibility to all of your AP activity that's tied to non-PO invoices, but whenever there's a purchase order referenced on an invoice, you'll also have the ability to evaluate the PO match criteria. And this is where, when you're approving invoices, you're going to have the ability to see side-by-side information. So if there's a purchase order number listed on the invoice, we'll actually do a lookup to that PO that's been imported from the accounting system and facilitate a match. And so flags will display where there's any type of variance. So if we get a invoice that doesn't match the purchase order, we can set flags that could represent a variance based on the quantity, based on the dollar value. We can also factor the receiving status in. So for organizations that have heavy volume of PO activity and you're constantly receiving items and invoices are coming in once those items are delivered, you can have the system evaluate whether it's matching to the entire PO or if there's a partial shipment, and if you are going to make a payment for that invoice before the entire PO is received, you can have this routed to the person that can make that call. So you'll have the ability to evaluate that information and run reports on the PO match criteria. When it comes time to post invoices, you can post those in a single step across multiple companies as well. So today, if you have to log in and out of different companies or entities in order to process invoices, you can do a selection across all of those entities. We can even pull in the checking account balance, and you could combine this step into really posting the invoice as well as notifying the approver of the payment that they have these payments to approve. Or you can separate those duties. So the good news is that we can streamline the process as much as possible, but still implement controls where needed. You'll also be able to see flags where perhaps something needs to be coded more completely before it can post, and it'll flag those type of exceptions. So having the system really drive the activity and notify the approvers and accounting team members where there's action that needs to be taken will give us better visibility. You're also going to have the flexibility, if we do pull that checking account balance information, to be flagged when there is balance availability concerns. So maybe you need to fund a checkbook from an operating account. You'll have visibility to what that funding level needs to be in order to process this batch of payments. That could also factor into how you stagger the timing of payments or approve those payments at a particular moment in time. So the good news is, from the perspective of having visibility to all of the AP activity, you'll have the flexibility to search across all of your invoice activity, all of your payment activity, and pull up historical records. So at any point in time, if you needed to produce information for an audit, like for example, a list of all the payments that went out in a particular payment batch, we could pull that up and easily display the date and timestamp audit trail of when that payment was initiated, when it cleared, what the method of payment was. So in this example, we can see a full batch of payment activity, and at any point in time, we could drill in to see more details about that particular payment. So this is where you're going to have kind of a one-stop shop to pull all of your historical information, all of the audit trail information, and even output a copy of the PDF of that invoice related to the payment with any of those out-of-the-box reports. So becomes a very easy tool to use to really expand visibility to things that may only today live in the accounting system, and you may only have visibility in AP to, where you might be able to extend the visibility to, say, the department, where they could see if a payment's been issued versus having to contact the accounting team to find out the status of that payment. So again, those type of improvements in visibility and communication will eliminate a lot of the back and forth that might go on between the accounting staff and the folks in the field. And then finally, the cleared payment information is going to become available here. So in this case, we could see a check was processed. We could see a listing of the invoices that were included in that check. And that's the type of detail that we provide to the supplier with our remittance advice. So the supplier is going to get notified that they have a payment coming. If that payment's going out electronically, then we'll send an email with the remittance advice. If that payment is going via check because that supplier hasn't signed up for electronic payment, we're going to bundle that information with the payment. The good news is that we're doing all of that on your behalf. So all you really need to do is approve electronically, and we're taking the steps to deliver payment to that supplier from there. So in addition to being able to search and export information, you're also going to have the ability to really, extend the visibility that today would only exist in the accounting system or in the email thread where that particular invoice is to other people. So if you've got a department manager that maybe needs to negotiate a new contract with a supplier, they can see all of that supplier's history. They can export that total spend, subtotal it, and dump information out to Excel, or you can easily export information out to PDF with a copy of the invoice and the audit trail history to provide for an auditor. So this becomes kind of the one-stop shop. Once you've got a good amount of data, usually after you've got a year's worth of data, you can even turn this over with a read-only user to allow auditors to go in and pull the data and documents themselves. So it becomes very easy from a self-service standpoint to make it easy for your approvers to simply log in and approve code and get invoices off of their plate while automatically notifying the next people in line, and then also having the folks have the right level of visibility throughout the life cycle of the invoice. Now, if we talk about the AvidPay process, and this ties into the payment process we just talked about, but we can also process payments independently. So maybe you're in the circumstance where maybe you have a document management system, or your AP is integrated through EDI or some other method, and really the payment side of the process is what you're looking to streamline. We can help from that perspective by itself. So the good news is that you've got the flexibility to start with an invoice process through payment. You can start with just the invoice process or just the payment process. We'll be able to help from either perspective. So when we talk about that supplier network that we mentioned, today we've onboarded over 700,000 suppliers. What that typically means is when we look at your supplier list, and this is something that we can provide from kind of an ROI analysis as part of the evaluation, is we can compare your supplier list to our existing network and determine which of those suppliers are already receiving what types of payments in the network. What that usually results in is about 30 to 40% of your suppliers that we've already onboarded, we're already making payments to on behalf of other customers, and then we have that just-in-time enrollment process to reach out to the remaining suppliers and onboard those suppliers over time. What this is going to do is also allow us to process payments from a single payment file. So in your typical process where you'd create a batch for checks, you might have a nacha file you have to send to the bank, you might have other payments that you're putting on a corporate card. You can create one batch of payments, route those through your approval, and then we'll be able to process the payments in the appropriate method to each of the suppliers. The good news is that suppliers can also have visibility to not only the remittance advice, but we can provide the ability for them to accelerate payments. So there are supplier tools that can be utilized for cash flow management from the supplier standpoint. They're also going to have greater visibility so that they can cut down on the communication with your team. Typically, if you've ever had to respond to the check is in the mail phone call, you can eliminate a lot of those with proactive communication that we send out to the vendors. And part of what we do is guarantee good funds once the payment's made. So we take on the responsibility of delivering the payment to the supplier. Once you've approved it, we're going to debit your account. We're going to process those payments to the supplier from the AvidPay clearing account, and we're going to be responsible for things like positive pay reporting, check follow-up, and managing the achievement process. So you're going to have really a full service payment process versus just an electronic method that you can use to deliver payment. And this is where AvidXchange really provides the service component along with our technology to help complete the process. So when that process initiates, you can start that process from the accounting team or accounting system, excuse me, if you're initiating that from within the accounting system, meaning you already have the invoice posted there. And what you'll be able to do is simply select your payments in a batch and send those to AvidPay through an API connection where it'll kick off an email notification to your check signer. So the check signer could again have visibility to all of the pending payments they can log in and approve. They could put a payment on hold and add a note. Maybe they need to release it at a later point in time, or there's an issue that is going to prevent that payment from going out today. And once those payments are approved, that's where AvidXchange is going to debit your account. Now, we do this on an individual basis for each payment versus a lump sum of that entire batch. So if you've ever had to reconcile against, a lump sum debit, and there may be a variety of different transactions, that's a very tedious process. We make it simple. When we debit your checkbook, we're going to reference the check number that we generated when you made that payment selection as the unique link between how we fund that payment and the actual method of payment we deliver and the clearing of that payment. So all of the reconciliation that needs to occur is going to be available through reporting in the AvidPay portal, and you'll just compare that to your bank statement and easily be able to reconcile each of the payments. When we deliver a payment through a supplier's merchant account, we can use a virtual MasterCard payment. That's going to allow the supplier and any supplier that can take a credit card payment to receive a one-time use card number for that specific payment for that specific amount. So we'll facilitate that to the supplier, and this is where, when we build that profile, we determine how that is actually physically delivered. Is it done through a secure email or through a website? Is there a phone hotline where that information gets punched in? You'd be surprised that there's still some folks that will take that information via fax, but we're going to use whatever that mechanism to deliver the information securely to that supplier is. And where we can, we're going to continue to improve how we process transactions straight through. So straight through processing becomes another way to engage in efficiency on the back end. Another method we offer for those folks that don't accept credit card or maybe have business rules where they'd prefer to receive those funds directly, we can process an AvidPay direct payment. And that's a direct deposit that will process to the supplier. We'll also be emailing the remittance advice for that method of payment as well. And those suppliers receiving that method of payment can have an online portal where they can view information. And then our default payment method, if the supplier isn't signed up for electronic payment in our network yet, and we reach out to them the first time, we're going to send a check. We're not going to hold up that payment to try to onboard them for an electronic payment method. We know that eventually that supplier is ready to take that payment electronically, whether we get them on the line today or weeks from now. We found oftentimes there was suppliers that we've traditionally been paying via check that over the last year or two have reached out proactively to us and said, hey, can we get payments in some other method now because we can't go to our PO box to collect all our checks. So things like that are prompting the suppliers to want to receive electronic payments, especially the more integrated they get in their back-end systems. On the AR side, it becomes more and more advantageous for them to receive that payment information electronically. So all of this ties into the cleared payment information, and you'll have the proof of payment available at your fingertips, as well as all of the reporting around the status of those payments that may be cleared or outstanding. So that's really the kind of overview of the AvidXchange platform, from invoice to payment, and also through our payment automation network. I guess we'll pause here for Q&A. I think there's probably a few questions that are out there lingering, so we'll take a few moments here to address any questions that the audience has.
Thank you, Jack. And as he said, we are going to open it up for questions now. So if you have any questions, please enter those in the questions section of the GoToWebinar. And in the meantime, we're going to do a quick poll. We would appreciate your response to. So we're just asking what your next steps are. Would you like to see a demo? Would you like some more information on AP automation? Or are you just here to learn? And we appreciate everyone who's answering the poll, so thank you for those responses. And we're going to close out the poll now and start in on some questions that have come through. So, Jack, our first question is going to be, what are integrations, and can you elaborate on the specifics?
Sure. So AvidXchange offers a number of integrations to different accounting systems. One of the biggest things that we've done most recently is we've built out our API integrations to to the Sage platform, specifically Sage 100 and Sage Intact, as well as a whole host of other horizontal accounting systems in the marketplace. What that really means is that you're going to have secure data that's being transferred to and from the accounting system versus having to manage a manual file upload or import process, where there may be solutions that are more generally available, but they typically will require either a consultant to generate the integration file or to create an integration. We've built these with our accounting system partners and the accounting systems directly to be able to facilitate that communication directly into your accounting system with basically a plug-and-play integration.
Our next question is, what does the implementation look like, and what is the cost associated with implementation?
So the implementation, it typically is going to range somewhere in the 30 to 60 day range for this particular solution. We often will spend more time with customers after they go live as well. So the good news is that you have a project manager-led implementation that's going to really help you to understand the capabilities of the system that fit with your business challenges, implement your business rules, and then help you as you go through milestones like, say, your first month-end close on the new AP process. So we stick with you for several months after go live to ensure that everything's running smoothly. We're not going to hand you a manual and feed you to the wolves from that perspective. There is a cost for that. Typically, we do have promotions from time to time that we're offering that can help offset that cost. So part of what we'll do when we engage in an evaluation is we can evaluate the vendor match criteria, determine if there's any potential for rebates that could help offset that, as well as the promotion. So the implementation cost can vary, but it can be as little as about $2,500 to about $8,000, and that obviously depends on size and scope.
Great, thank you. And then our next question is going to be, how long does it take for setup? So I don't know if that's different from implementation, or can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the setup, I mean, as part of the onboarding process that we just described, the setup is usually kind of the first several weeks of that 30 to 60 day time frame. So typically we'll set the system up, we'll work through all of the workflow rules, and then allow the customers to test in their own environment with their own people so that they can get feedback, and that way we can make any tweaks or changes. So the setup is typically going to occur at the initial phase of the onboarding process, and then you'll have time to test that setup, and that way we can make any adjustments needed.
Okay. And unless we have any last minute submissions, so I think this will be our last question. So how do I know if this is a good fit for me? So I think they're asking, what does the average company that uses Avid look like, or how do I know if the solution is a good fit for me?
Yeah, so really, there's a couple of ways that you can think about that. We can help you with an evaluation if you'd like to reach out to us one-on-one and walk you through kind of how the solution would fit specifically around your process. Typically, where we see there be an ROI is when you get over, say, 100 invoices, 100 payments per month, or if you're at the point where you're thinking about adding maybe a part-time FTE to handle accounts payable. So usually that's where the volume would kind of come in that would trigger someone to automate AP. However, there could be other business priorities like implementing more controls or facilitating PO match, where the volume might not necessarily be the important deciding factor, but that's kind of where we typically see the ROI begin to make sense.
Okay. So thank you everyone for your questions. And if you have any other questions or you want any more information, reach out to your SWK rep or SWK, and together with Avid, we'll connect you and get you those answers. And again, I would like to thank Rhonda and Jack for being here today and for a great presentation. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone taking the time in the audience to attend this webinar. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.